In progress.
Hello, grade 7, Matayom 1. Welcome to this science lesson, chapter 6 about heat. I'm recording this so you can prepare for your final test and you can watch this repeatedly with the Thai translation that you can set here on YouTube. So this is topic 6.1, heat is a form of energy. What is heat? Now, heat is a form of energy. It's heat that can make things hot, and we can use heat to do work. We feel hot when the sun shines. This shows that the sun is a source of heat energy. Most of the heat on the earth comes from the sun. Example, we are having this activity showing that the sun gives out heat. We need these materials, a piece of copper foil and a piece of wet tissue. How to do it? This is the procedure. One, a piece of copper foil is placed in the sun. After a few minutes, the copper foil is touched with your hand. Number two, a piece of wet tissue is placed in the sun. The wet tissue is observed after some time. Observation. The copper foil feels hot and the piece of wet tissue dries up after being exposed to the sun for some time. This shows that the sun gives out heat energy. Discussion. The copper foil absorbs heat energy from the sun, so it feels hot. Water in the wet tissue absorbs heat from the sun and changes its state from liquid to gas. The tissue dries up after all the water has changed to vapor. Conclusion. The sun gives out heat energy. There are other sources of heat. Apart from the sun, there are many other sources of heat. Heat can be produced in many ways. Here are some sources of heat. Rubbing or friction. Remember last time we rubbed our hands? So rubbing two objects against each other can produce heat. I want you to rub your hands right now together for some time and then place them on your cheeks. Your cheeks will feel warm, showing that heat can be produced by friction. Okay? Try to rub it and feel with your ears or your mouth. It's hot, right? Okay? So rubbing can produce heat. Another source is burning. When an object burns, it produces a flame that gives our heat, or it produces flame that gives out heat. So burn a candle or a piece of paper and put your hands above it. Your hands will feel hot, showing that burning substances can produce heat. Another source is electricity. When electric current flows through a wire, heat is produced. Now switch on an electric bulb for some time and place your hands near the bulb. Your hands can feel the heat coming out from the bulb. Now, heat can also be produced by A, bending metal. So bending a coat hanger or a wire back and forth several times produces heat in the object. B, chemical reaction. So after mixing sodium hydroxide with water in a test tube, the test tube will get warm. And another is by collision. You know, collision? When an iron hit, okay? So when an iron nail is hit by a hammer several times, the hammer and the nail will get hot. There are uses of heat in our daily life. Heat is a useful form of energy. We use heat to A, cook food, dry clothes, boil water, and produce steam to generate electricity, and dry food for preservation. Also, warm ourselves. So you see any of these appliances, you can use heat and they produce heat too. Now, no need for that workbook because you don't have it. So what about heat and temperature? So heat is a form of energy. An object becomes hot when it absorbs heat. So heat is measured in joules. You see, J, temperature measures how hot or cold an object is. Now, the unit of temperature is degrees Celsius. This is the sign, or Kelvin. Temperature can be measured with a thermometer. You see there on the right side. And so, the difference between heat and temperature here, let's compare the two. Heat is a form of energy. Temperature is the degree of hotness or coldness of an object. Heat can do work. Temperature cannot do work. Heat is measured in joule. Temperature is measured in degrees Celsius or Kelvin. Heat transfers from a hot area to a cold area. Temperature increases when heated and decreases when cooled. Let's have this activity showing the difference between heat and temperature. We need these materials or apparatus like 500 ml beakers and thermometers. Procedure is that one, we have two 500 ml beakers labeled P and Q respectively. They are filled with 200 millimeter of water. And what happens? The temperature of water in both beakers is measured. You see that? The temperature, they're the same using a thermometer. And then 300 ml of the boiling water is poured into the beaker P, and 200 ml of the boiling water is poured into the beaker Q, as shown in the above figure. Now, what happens next? The mixture of hot and cold water is then stirred gently with a thermometer. And then five, the maximum temperature reached by the water in each beaker is recorded. So you will see the observation here. Beaker Q shows a greater increase in temperature. Discussion. 1. The volume of boiling water that is poured into beaker Q is double the volume of boiling water that is poured into beaker P. After mixing the boiling water, the temperature of water in beaker Q is higher compared with the temperature of water in beaker P. It shows that temperature and heat are not the same, though they are closely related to each other. As more boiling water is poured into the beaker Q, more heat is found in beaker Q. The change in temperature of water in beaker Q is higher than that in beaker P. Conclusion. An object with a larger mass has more heat content than an object with a smaller mass, although their temperatures are the same. When two objects are at the same temperature, the object that has larger mass contains greater heat energy. We have these common mistakes. Objects with the same temperature contain the same amount of heat. The higher the temperature of an object, the larger the amount of heat contained in it. The truth is, the amount of heat contained in an object depends on A, the type of material that the object is made of, B, the mass or the size of the object, and C, the temperature of the object. Let's watch this video about the difference between heat and energy.
Heat energy. Everyone probably knows something about heat. We often use the word to describe something that feels hot when we touch it, or to describe a hot day. To fully understand what heat is, we first have to understand something about energy. Energy has to do with the movement of the particles that make up matter. If we were to look up close at the particles of something very cold, we would see them moving very slowly. If their movement is very slow, they have less energy than the particles that make up something that is hot. For example, particles of hot water in a pot would vibrate very quickly, so they would contain lots of energy. Heat is actually a form of energy that is being transferred from a substance at a higher temperature to another substance or substances at a lower temperature. Have you ever touched a hot pot that was on a stove? What happens when you touch it? It burns your hand because the heat energy is transferring from the hot pot to your hand. Your hand had a different temperature than the hot pot. Your hand was much cooler than the hot pot. Heat energy always travels from a hotter substance to the colder substance. In this case, it travels from the pot to your hand. Think about what happens to a mug of coffee when you pour hot coffee into it. The mug felt cool at first, but then felt hotter as you poured the hot coffee into it. The hot coffee transferred its heat energy to the mug, which was cooler. Heat is not the same as temperature. Have you ever used a thermometer to measure something's temperature? Temperature is a measure of the energy that matter contains, or how hot or cold it is. So, when you use a thermometer, you are measuring how fast or slow the particles in matter are moving. The faster the movement of the particles in an object, the higher the temperature of the object will be. Heat, once again, is the transfer of an object's energy to another object with a lower temperature. Heat energy is something that is very useful to all living things. In fact, no life would be possible on our planet without the light and heat energy from the sun. The sun makes it possible for all plants to grow. Plants, in turn, are needed by living things to consume. When we're in our homes or schools, we use heaters. These heaters heat the air right above them and eventually transfer this heat energy to the rest of the air in the room. This works in a way quite similar to how an oven transfers its heat to a bowl of liquid kept in it. The hot bowl transfers its heat energy to the liquid being heated. Toasters and coffee makers are two other sources of heat energy found in our homes. Can you think of any other source of heat energy? A fire of any kind is a source of heat energy. If you go camping, a fire will provide a nice source of heat energy on a cold night. A gas stove has a flame that is the source of heat for warming things up. Our own bodies produce heat. You can tell this by holding a piece of ice. After a few minutes, the heat energy from your body is transferred to the ice, causing it to melt. A bathtub that is filled with hot water can transfer its heat energy to a person who needs to be warmed up. Heat energy can be used for many things. The most obvious is for keeping us warm in our homes and cooking food on our stove. As mentioned before, a hot bath can be used to warm up our bodies. Heat energy is also used by plants to make food for themselves. In some places, there are hot sources of water found deep within the earth. These can be used as a source of electricity. When hot water is used to make electricity, this is called geothermal energy. Here is the summary of the lesson.
Just read so you can understand. Here. Wait. I need to skip this one right here. Let's read that one. Okay? So you will understand what this means. All right? Okay. Summary. Heat energy always travels from a hotter substance to a colder substance. For example, when we touch a hot pot, the heat energy transfers from the hot pot to our hand, which is cold. This is why it burns our hand. Temperature tells us how hot or cold a substance is. We use the thermometer to measure the temperature of a substance. Heat energy is very useful to all living beings. Plants use light and heat energy of the sun to grow and make food. Animals eat these plants. Other sources of heat energy are heater, gas stove, fire, and hot water bath. We use heat energy for cooking food, to warm ourselves in winters, and to make electricity. Now that we have watched this video, I want you to see the conclusions that heat is a form of energy. An object becomes hot when it absorbs heat, and heat is measured in joules. And then you see here, the sun is a source of heat energy. Most of the heat on the earth comes from the sun. Heats can be produced by rubbing or friction, burning, electricity, bending metal, chemical reactions, collision, and even more. Temperature measures how hot or cold an object is. Conclusions: the unit for temperature is degrees Celsius or Kelvin. Temperature can be measured with a thermometer. An object with a larger mass has more heat content than an object with a smaller mass, even although their temperatures are the same. When two objects are at the same temperature, the object that has a larger mass contains greater heat energy. I want you to answer here. Check how much you understand this subtopic by doing test yourself 6.1 on page 124. What I mean, answer the questions on 6.1 on page 124 and see you the next video. Don't forget, come to me. I will check your work and give you points. All right. Is that clear, students?